The long-anticipated Afghanistan map for DCS has been announced, along with a release plan that, to many, seems overly complicated to downright nefarious. And in a community that always has its fair share of opinions and strong points of view, I decided to go directly to the source and find out what exactly is going on with Afghanistan. And I will say for people watching this, I'm coming at this from a standpoint of skepticism, which is kind of what spurred this conversation because I made sort of a joke about it in our little side chat about it, and you and Nine Line jumped in. Well, wait a minute. So I am asking questions that I think a lot of people are asking, and then we'll just kind of get to the bottom of it. But first of all, let's talk about the Afghanistan map. How long have you guys been working on this?
Oh boy, probably for about a year and a half, maybe. So not a huge amount of time. Fortunately, with the way the TDK is now and the most recent technology we're using, we're able to put these together significantly faster than we used to be able to do. Which is also why we're doing Iraq in parallel as well. Actually, two different map teams within Eagle Dynamics, but we're able to actually do two maps at once at the same time.
Oh, wow. How many people, like, roughly are on a team to do that? How many people does it take?
Oh boy, probably approximately 20 to 30, I would imagine.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Gosh, okay. So, and I don't know how much you know about the process, how you get into it, but how does that work? Does it just take like map data that exists and then translate it, or how does that stuff work?
It's
They
a
got to go to your building.
combination. So you have your digital terrain elevation data, and obviously you have different degrees of resolution based on where in the map it is. And the same thing with the imagery as well and the textures. So in areas around, say, airfields, big cities, and other POIs, you're going to have a really high detail level in the DTED as well as the textures, maybe down to like 1 meter or less. And then generally between those areas in the kind of center portion of the map, then you have what we call more of a medium detail. And then generally on the very outside periphery of the map, what we want to do is have a lower resolution, again, in DTED, in textures, which basically acts as a buffer. So you don't have this like really dramatic drop off from medium detail to nothingness. Sorry. Then on top of that, of course, then you have what's called GIS data, all the roads, the rivers, the
Right.
power lines, and all the data that goes into there. But then on top of that, of course, then you have all the essentially art hand generated textures. So maybe some fields we do, some urban area textures, building textures, and all that, of course, is very time intensive. And it's then combining all that together into a single map.
So I want to say, talking to people who've made maps in the past, it
Mhm.
was years of effort, and you're saying this one has taken about a year and a half. Is it
Around there.
becoming is it becoming exponentially faster? Like, you think that in the next couple of years, you guys are gonna be able to jam these out even faster, or is it kind of reaching a
Well, I
roadblock?
think particularly when we go to the whole Earth model,
Mm,
then it's going to be, I think, much more automated. So yeah, I think it'd be substantially faster at that point. Right now it feels like we're kind of in a intermediate area of the completely hand generated regional maps, and
yeah,
then at the same time we're also developing the technology, kind of the next big step of the whole Earth map. And well, I
okay.
think in the future it's not like they're going to be one after the other and that's it. They're going to be in parallel, I think, for a very long time, because as you might imagine, for like a whole Earth map, that's going to be based on current data. So it really precludes us from doing something, say, in World War II or Korea era or something like
Mm,
that. So I think for a
okay,
while, at least, probably quite a while, we'll have both in parallel.
okay. Yeah, I didn't think about that, like, because I know what Mariana's map, there's a plan to have it modern in World War II, or it already I haven't kept up with that, honestly.
Yeah, so Modern's been out for a while, and we're still continuing to update that. But one of the big three maps we're working on internally right now, Afghanistan, Iraq, of course. But the third big one is Mariana's Summer 1944.
So why Afghanistan of all the places to pick? Because some people are going to say, well, great, another brown map.
Yep.
What was sort of the driving force for Afghanistan?
Well, just if you look in the last 50 or so years since the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, it's been one of the key uh, combat theaters in history since the 1980s. So just to ignore it seems to be sticking your head in the sand a bit, honestly. I
Right.
think, honestly, where I think some people are not enthralled about it, and I get it, It's not, a peer-on-peer, force-on-force type map scenario. It's not. It's a coin map. Some people really enjoy that type of operation. Obviously, it's going to be 99%, air to ground, unless you want to do something ahistorical.
Right.
But it's obviously a major part of U.S. operations in the past 20 years. Soviets before that. It's kind of hard not to do it and say we're trying to model modern day aviation in combat.
Yeah, and I would say for people that do look at it as another brown map, I mean, I was there, spent a year there. It's a very different environment
Yeah.
than Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria. You know, the mountains alone. I mean, there's some really. It's a beautiful country. Yes, it is brown. There are some green areas, but generally speaking, but it's very rough terrain. Then you've got these very like dune like deserts. It is a very interesting terrain, and I do look forward to seeing it as a map.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and the other thing too is it's not like we're just working on Iraq and Afghanistan.
right.
Obviously, coal was in work by Orbix, and we have, I can't go into it right now, but at least two more green maps being developed
Okay.
right now as well. One of which in particular is going to make people very excited.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's good to look forward to.
So we're not like wedded to just doing arid climate maps. It's just, again, if you look at the past several decades where most of the major conflicts in this world have happened, well, it tends to be
Yeah.
in the Mid East.
Yeah. Yeah. How much does player performance from I'm talking about from like their system standpoint play
Mhm.
into those decisions? Because when Marianas came out, it was a bit of a slideshow for a lot of people just because there's
Mhm.
so much going on with the
Yeah,
map itself.
yeah.
Obviously, the brown maps are more they're less less work, less taxing on systems. Does that play into your guys' thought process at all? Is that something that you're
Well,
concerned
yeah,
about?
absolutely. So, anytime we have a map, still in the production phase before release, one of the big things we have to go through, of course, is testing the map performance wise over a wide variation of machines, not just internally, but it's actually one of the big reasons we have this rather extensive external team now as well. So that way we can identify any big issues that we're running into. Now, naturally, of course, a big part of that too is why we really focused over the past couple of years on performance, particularly in multi-threading, DLSS, FSR, working on Vulkan as well. So it's kind of a combination of doing the testing to make sure that's going to run well on the particularly obviously the min spec system all the way up to the recommended system. But in parallel, we just keep plugging away on improving performance across different areas. And even since January, we've had two different releases which increased performance. So I think one was more multi-thread focused, and the other was more of the terrain engine focused. So it's just something we're plugging away at all the time.
What year is the Afghan map going to be set in?
I believe it's around 2008-ish.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's going to have all the fobs on there, all the bases that were being used at the time, or at least not probably not all, but some of them, some of the major
I
ones
think
at
the
least.
major ones like, Bastion's definitely there,
Sure.
places like that. The smaller ones, with the different assets, you can go there and create your own as well. So, yeah, I
Okay.
think the really big ones will be there, but, the small, like, outpost and fobs, those are probably have to be created per mission.
So let's get on to the Afghanistan concept. So what is the plan for release and how is that going forward? Explain that from the Eagle Dynamics standpoint for everyone so they can understand.
Sure. So you can think of it as two paths. The first path, it's no different at all than any other map in DCS. You can just buy the full map right up front. If you want to buy it in pre-purchase, get 30% off, fill your boots. If you want to wait till it's released and take a look at it, then you can get it then at 20% off during early access. Or if you want to wait for the final thing to be done, which will include all of Afghanistan plus parts of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, yeah, Turkmenistan, but not
All
as
the
far as
stands.
Kazakhstan, parts of Pakistan, Iran. Unfortunately, just size-wise, this will be by far the biggest map we've ever done, and literally, it is not possible with the map technology to move it far enough south to go to the Arabian Sea. I know a lot of people have been asking for carry ops. It's just, unfortunately, with the current technology, and again, this is one of the reasons we're going to the whole Earth model, is it's just not possible at this point. Anyhow, so again, there's no different than buying any other map in DCS. But one thing we've noticed over the years is we have a lot of users that want to get into DCS, but they just can't afford it. And so, literally, this plan came up last week. One of the option was that, well, how about we give them the option? We're not going to force them. It's just an option that they could buy maybe one or two of the regions independently at a much lower cost. And that's what it really comes down to. Now, so if you buy a single region, it doesn't mean that there's nothing around that region. It's much more analogous to what we did with UGRA on the Normandy 1944 map and then the Normandy 2.0 map. That a lot of the Normandy 44 customers were a little upset, or could have been upset, if the 2.0 came out and it divided the community between those. So what we did is it allowed 1944 customers to basically play on the 2.0 map, but they didn't quite the level of detail as you do in 2.0. It's not something ridiculous like Minecraft or something like that detail. It's actually quite high detail. I don't know where that idea came from, but it's going to be a bit less than you would if you actually bought it, as you might imagine. So again, it's an option that if you don't have the budget and you're particularly, say, interested, the Kandahar and Helmand province, well, just get that. Or if I'm just interested around Kabul and Bagram, I'll just get that one. And it's just, giving players an option.
How many chunks? Maybe you said and I missed it. How many chunks of the map are going to be? 3 different chunks, or
so
you get the whole
southeast
thing?
will be was it Firuz, way out in the west where the Italians were. Then to the south we have Helmand, where the Brits were. Kandahar, Americans. That will be the first one. Obviously, a lot to do there. I'm not sure, you've probably read the book by Ed Macy.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting things to do there, particularly in Helmand, and of course Kandahar. Then the second one will be east, which of course will be Kabul, Bagram, coast, that area. And then the final one will be up in the north, which I think that's where the Germans were, if I remember right.
So, yeah.
I think so. Anyway, but yeah, those would be the 3 different areas.
And so those 3, because I feel like I don't have it with me. I wish I did. There was a picture that was posted and it showed like the whole Afghan map, and then it had the 3 chunks. If I buy those 3 chunks, it creates that whole one, or?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you're going to buy all 3, then it makes more sense just to buy it up front.
Right, 100%.
The option is really made to people who don't want to buy the whole thing.
One question, this came up, I was chatting with somebody last night on stream, and we were talking about this. If you buy section A, the first one, and I get the second one, and we're flying together, we can fly into each other's map. Like you said, it's going to be lower res for me when I'm in yours, or whatever. A little bit. So, and that's what the question was. Is it going to be, how do I frame this? In some games, there's a cheat essentially where if I lower the res, there's less vegetation, there's less stuff, and now bad guys are harder to hide, right? I can find them more easily. Is that going to be the type of situation where we're seeing that
Not
I
so
go into
much.
your map and
really divides.
You know
folks who are, I understand where you're coming from, concerned about this. Take a look at the 1944 versus 2.0 maps in Normandy. That's literally what we're shooting for here. You're going to have a little bit a lower terrain res and probably some texture res, things like that. But all the airfields will still be there. There's nothing preventing 2 players with 2 different regions from flying with each other, or say you have one region, you're playing, someone else has the whole map. In no way does it divide single player or multiplayer or anything like that. That was one of the most important things for us to do.
So the timeline right now, as I understand it, is the first map is going to be available in June.
Yep, looking for, I think it's 24th June, if I remember right, is what we're shooting for. Yep.
And that's
then about
target,
3 months after that for the additional ones. So all 3 regions are actually in development right now. It's just that the Helmand Kandahar is certainly the furthest along. And that's why we're
Okay.
putting that one out first. And also, again, historically, it was a really intense area, particularly for UK and US operations. So we think it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was at. I
Yeah.
know some people have complained, it's, "Oh, that's the not
Yeah, I
much
don't get
going
that.
on section." Well, okay, if you say so. There was
Yeah,
enough going on to keep me busy.
right.
Um, but you said so June, and then you said 3 months later, the
Yeah,
next
we're
one,
looking at, obviously it
roughly?
may vary a little bit,
Sure.
but right now we're shooting for 3-month periods between regional releases. And then, of course, so after June, hopefully then 6 months after that, then the entire map would be done at that point.
Okay. So if I buy the main one right now at
Mhm.
55?
48.99
48, no,
or
okay,
30% off.
48.99. I get the whole map, and then
Yep.
it's gonna be as it gets released, that's what's gonna download. So
Yep.
if I buy it now, I get the first one. When the second one comes out and I go to start up DCS, it's gonna auto load, or is it something I'm gonna have to
Yep.
go in there and select to load? How big are these maps looking to be? Like from
Oh,
a disk standpoint?
disk. I do not know that off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's gonna be huge, I'm assuming.
Not going to be small.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, and I think a lot of folks have noticed this in the screenshots and the video, is we're using a fair amount more high resolution satellite texture,
Hmm.
which on one hand, it gives a much more realistic look. But on the other hand, as you might imagine, there's going to be, obviously growth in the footprint for the file size.
Yeah, because what I think the South Atlantic one is
That was a big one.
50 or 60 gigs.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big area. But
Yeah.
talking about area, because that was the other thing I didn't think about. And like I said, I kind of purposely didn't do a lot of research because I wanted to pick your brain. But I took these photos as I was finding information. So
Mhm.
the Syria map, if I remember correctly, is 173,000 square miles,
Okay.
roughly. Uh, and then I just said, well, how big is Afghanistan? And you said the map goes outside of Afghanistan, but
Correct.
Afghanistan, according to the interweb, is 252,000 square miles. So it's a pretty big map. And I think that
Yeah.
to me, once I saw those numbers and it kind of put it into context, I was like, okay, I guess I can start to see maybe the wisdom in parsing this out in chunks versus all at once. And then,
Yeah.
as you said, if you're getting that sort of feedback loop from people that they don't necessarily want to buy a giant map, because the space is an issue too, as we're talking about.
It
I
is.
fully expect this map to be well over 100 gigs,
Mm.
if I had to guess.
I don't know.
And yeah, I mean, I know, and that's fine, but just guessing, it's got to be 100, 120 if I had to guess. And so that's a consideration that people can have as well.
Yeah.
So that starts
Well,
to make sense.
and the nice thing is, granted, it's only been out for sale for a couple of days, and I was expecting maybe 1 in 20 sales would be the regional. It's
Uh-huh.
actually been much, much higher, which
Really
indicates to me that people actually, wanted the lower price option.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I mean,
significantly higher. Yeah,
nothing tells the story like the actual
it
numbers. So I
is.
mean,
It
that's good.
is.
Well, then that's good stuff. Okay. Well, what else do you want to share about the map or any other maps? You said there's some other ones coming. I know you can't talk necessarily about them. We've got the Cola map on the way. I think there was an Australian one that somebody was working on. I haven't heard much
Yeah,
about
there's
that lately.
called Top End Australia, which, as you might imagine, northern section of Australia, and they're also working on a PC9. But the next big map is going to be Cola, of course, and we're working really closely with Orbix right now. It's been in test for a little while, cleaning some stuff up. Actually, I just did another review today, so I would expect to see that in the not too distant future. And of course, we got Iraq coming along in parallel. And there's a couple more. We're just not ready to announce them yet. But all I can say is they'll be, again, quote unquote, green maps.
Is the intention for this template that you've done with Afghanistan with the
Mhm.
multiple sections, is that something that you plan to do going forward, or is this particular to this map because of the scale?
That's a good. We don't know. In many ways, this is very, very much an experiment. Now, clearly, the past couple of days have been a rough start for I think multiple reasons. But, in the end, we'll see how the sales go. We'll see how customers in the end, take to the model, the option. And if it works well and customers want it, of course, we'll keep doing it. If people don't want it, then of course we won't. But again, in many ways, this is kind of a trial balloon, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, does it affect you? Does it cost you more to do it this way? Does it hurt you to do it this way?
No, honestly, in the end, we probably end up losing money on it because we're not forcing.
Oh,
If someone wants to do an Afghan map, we're not forcing them to buy the whole map now at a higher price. If they want the Afghan map, they could do it at a lower price and less money back to us.
because I think that was one of the comments, and again, a lot of these comments, they do come from ignorance, and I'll admit that for myself as well.
Mhm.
But people, I think, looked at this and said, "Well, this is a way to milk money from people." But as you're
Well,
talking about it, and as I'm understanding it, I don't see how that math would work
no, it's
out.
actually quite the opposite. We actually,
Oh.
in the end, we'll probably end up losing money on this one. Not losing money, I'm sorry, on the map, but it would be more profitable if we were only to give the whole map option. Sorry, it's a better way to state it.
Yeah, because for the smaller maps are on sale now for 29.99. I want to say numbers seem
Yeah, I think
right.
it's like 24,
Yeah,
30%.
it's
Yeah.
in the 20s.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only validity I can see in a comment like that, which we're actually looking into find a way to address that, is edge case scenario. Someone buys, say, one region, say, "Okay, I'll buy a second region." Well, I wanna buy a third region.
Right.
Well, in the
Yeah.
current model, if you do that 3 times, that would be end up more than the cost of the total map, and we get that.
Right.
So, actually, we did talk about that, and what we're looking at is some type of option that if you end up buying a 3rd map to complete the set, we'll get you some kind of discount to bring it much closer to the cost of the full map cost.
And that's not uncommon with things that are bundled. I mean, that's the point of
Well, it's
bundles,
kind of industry
you know?
standard regardless
Right.
of what
Yeah,
industry
yeah.
you look at. If
Yeah.
you if the customer, gives you the trust, and they buy the larger product, you give them at a lower price. Whereas someone who kind of holds back and does it piecemeal, well, they end up paying a little bit more. It's, whether it's a car or what have you, it's this industry standard. But again, we understand that there's some concern about that. So we're going to try to, you know, have a way to lower that gap. So in that edge case scenario, they wouldn't have to pay that much more than if they bought the whole map at the start.
And that does remind me of a comment that I've seen multiple times, and I made it to you guys just as an example of the things that I've been hearing.
Mhm.
And now that you've talked about it, you've sort of already addressed it, but I'll address it for people that are listening that might be screaming at the screen right now. Super carrier, right? We talked about,
Yeah.
oh, super carrier is supposed to come with this stuff, and you guys are still working on it. It's really an apples and oranges comparison at the end of the day. Making a map is
Wow.
relatively
Not even
simple
apples and
compared
oranges.
to
We should go with fruit and like apples and granite. It's completely different.
sure. Okay.
Um, again, the big difference here with super carrier, it's brand new technology. In fact, we couldn't really do it until we had multi-threading last year.
Mm,
And whereas with maps, it's very much a known quantity based on the TDK.
right.
Unfortunately, just developing brand new technology, um, multi-threading, and the other technical aspects required for supercarrier has certainly taken longer than we expected. There's no doubt about that. But again, the delivery or development time between a map and something like that, it's just you couldn't find two different technologies to compare to each other.
Yeah, one's relatively cut and dry, and others
Yeah,
you're still kind of building the airplane in flight.
very much.
Um, and to my knowledge, I mean, I can't think of you guys ever having announced a map and then like not delivering it eventually. You know what I
No.
mean? Like not be like, well, never mind, we can't do it. We can't make it.
Well, even further, I think virtually, so definitely Nevada, Persian Gulf, um, Syria, South Atlantic. Actually, there's far more maps than not that started with a particular area, region, and then expanded upon that later. So the whole model of, say, starting in Helmand, Kandahar, and Firuz, again, it's just not much different than we've done in the past. I understand that some folks would prefer to start, say, up in the east around Bagram and Kabul. But again, I don't think it takes away starting in Helmand and Kandahar. I think those are, just as interesting, honestly.
Well, and especially with the timeline you're talking, we're not talking years between the two.
No,
We're talking a
no,
matter
it'll
of
be,
months.
and Nick's pretty adamant that he's going to be driving the team hard to hit these dates.
And I'm willing to bet that just the top topography is part of that, because
Yeah,
the area that you're coming out with first is simpler. I mean, it's flatter terrain. There's more desert than mountains.
to the
Start
south
getting into
part, yeah.
Kabul. Yeah, you start getting into Kabul and stuff. Now you're getting into a lot more
Yeah, but as you
broken
know, around
terrain that you got to
Kandahar is
build.
very mountainous.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So no, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think as you explain it, it's not rocket science.
yeah,
And it makes sense. I've always had this debate with people, and I don't understand why it still exists. And I don't know if this conversation exists in other things, because I don't follow other things as much as I do follow this. But the sort of pre-order early access um angst that exists.
yep,
And I've
yep,
had this conversation with so many people, and they're like, I'm not going to pay pre-order for this module, right? For the A10, whatever, that's coming out. I'm not going to do that because
okay,
they may not deliver. And my argument is always like, well, when have they not delivered? It may not deliver on the timeline that you want, but when has it not been delivered? And why are you going to pay $20, $30 more to make a point? Like, I think Eagle Dynamics wants you to wait. Like, honestly, if you want to pay more, they're
right,
not going to complain. And so I think this is the case too, where it makes sense to buy the whole thing now and just get the chunks, unless you are limited in funds, limited in space, or you're just not interested in all of
correct.
Afghanistan, and that's fine. So
Yep,
that's an interesting way to do it, particularly I think with a map that's as large as this one is going to
yep.
be. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't for smaller maps, because Iraq is considerably smaller than Afghanistan.
Well,
But
actually,
yeah.
Iraq will be, by the time it's done, quite large as well.
Okay, so you're grabbing a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
because I
around
think
it,
we
a
even
lot of
talked
real
about
estate.
this, so hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here and hear about it later. But we're starting, we even said in the newsletter, centered on Baghdad. That does not mean just Baghdad. It just means the center point is on Baghdad.
Right.
So it goes all the way up, I think, well north of Mosul, way out into Iran to the east, and almost as far as Basra to the south. Um, and then after we do that, then we'll expand probably even much further south. So we can do Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom, or we could go to the east and do the Iran or Iraq War. So by the time that map gets done, again, 3 regions again, that's going to be a massive map as well.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the size of a hard drive I'm gonna need if you guys keep pumping out these maps. But
I'm literally looking at 3 2 terabyte drives on my desk that I use every day.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's getting out of control. Well,
But then
very
again, I got
cool.
like 4 different builds I use every day.
Yeah, that's the one thing I don't miss from messing with like the Apache build and all that
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
It's just like which DCS do I load and which one do I have to update and stuff. So yeah,
yeah,
you're a better man than me for that.
yeah. You want to talk
Um,
about Apache?
sure. What do you got?
So the big things, so we got an update planned for next week. Unfortunately, we just want a little more test, but we are very, very close to releasing Link, Zoom, and C-Scope.
Okay. All
So
right.
those are coming very soon. So again, it's not going to be able to make it to April, but we'll probably be out for the May or June update.
Well, awesome. Unless there's anything else you want to share, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. And I appreciate you taking time and explaining all that stuff to me.
No, anytime. Obviously, I think obviously hindsight's 2020, but I think a lot of the confusion came actually not so much this week. I think honestly, I think we're pretty clear between the FAQ, the store pages, the newsletter, and other places where we really try to lay out as much as possible. But the previous week, again, in hindsight, it could have been, I think, clearer. Particularly the image that was included that had the big box around the western area that, I think rather than, you know, really reading through the text, was easier to look at the image. Oh, it's only going to be half the map. And then some folks were
Yeah.
off to the races. So that communication could have been better. So one of the things we're actually probably going to do, which unfortunately got stuck in my lap, is when we have future announcements, you're probably going to have to deal with the talking head of me, talking about the product, talking about the features. Because one thing we found is the written word can be a bit challenging for some folks,
Sure.
whereas the spoken word can be just a lot easier. So we're going to try to go down that route just to try to make that communication that much better.
And we were talking before about doing more live streaming and being able to
Yeah.
interact with the audience and stuff. Because yeah, I think 100%. I think the because I wasn't paying attention to it. I think I was at work when you guys released that picture, so I wasn't paying attention to much. But yeah, I think maybe like you said, some people off to the races with, oh,
Yeah,
this is the preconception, and first impressions are lasting ones, and then
they are.
now the machine is rolling, and that's what everyone is saying. But
Yeah.
no, it makes sense. It makes sense, honestly, if you're an avid player of DCS, to get the map. But it's cool that you guys are thinking through those processes of, okay, what about that dude? What about that dude who just can't afford to buy the whole map now, but he
Right.
can afford these little chunks of time? Can we make sure that we don't kind of screw him over
Right. Well, of
further down
course,
the
I
road?
think we're pretty aggressive with the sales. So, it's our hope between the sales and the regional aspects that, someone who's, on a bit of a budget can still afford to, go ahead and get a region that they're interested in. And again, I can't, emphasize enough that this is very much an experiment. And if it goes well, we'll continue it. If it doesn't go well, we won't. But I think the logic of it is sound. I think just we need to get the communication tightened up a bit so people truly understand what the options are. Because I think a lot of folks also, for one reason or another, are assuming that they have to buy it in chunks. They can't buy it as a whole map,
Yeah.
or again, there's only one region available. So we need to continue kind of hammering that home of exactly what those options are.
Yeah, I think that's probably the crux of it. I think that's the way it was presented to me when I first heard about it, is that you had to
Yeah.
buy it in chunks, and it was just like,
No.
and then, but no, but I think that I think it would be a good map for those that are concerned about just too much brown. It's just a
Yep.
very different animal. We've got a picture of
Yep.
Kandahar actually in the background here.
Yep.
I mean, very challenging flying. It's gonna be a great helicopter map.
Oh
If
yeah.
it's at the graphics that it's at, I mean, flying. I can't express the most fun I ever had in my life was flying helicopters in Afghanistan. There are places
Mm.
that it's like flying on the surface of the Death Star. Like there's just
Wow.
canyons that are, 1,000
Right.
or more feet, and you're stuck in it.
All right.
So and in fact, I'm looking forward to it because the first chunk you guys are putting out is the area that I flew up in Tarankot,
Mm. Cool.
north of Kandahar. Because the first thing I checked the map is like, okay, where's TK? So I'm interested to see how that played out.
We'll
So
get
it's
you on
going
the
to be
test
very
bench too.
challenging for people in the helicopter world, and I think to the jets too. To your point of, I think guys get very hung up on reenacting certain scenarios,
Mm.
but as you said, sort of this ahistorical situation. I mean, flying jets in these mountains, and it's going to give you, it's all the things that I like about the Caucasus map. But I always like, I mean, I wish there was more mountains, or I wish there was kind of like less water, more ground. Now you got
Mm.
nothing, you don't have any water, so
Yeah.
um, much to the chagrin of the Hornet guys.
Yeah.
But the Hornets took off from Kandahar. I watched them do it, so you could do it too.
There you go.
Well, cool, Matt. Thanks so much
Yeah, you
for
bet.
sharing that with us. I,
You
I
bet.
really appreciate it.